With DBD's most asked for collab now reality, and seemingly being a successful one too, think that, just like with the Resident Evil chapter before it, that their success is enough for FNAF to get a second chapter. With that said, I do think other chapters like Silent Hill or even an original chapter should get a sequel before FNAF does, as fans of those properties and original content should get some love too. With that bit of a disclaimer out of the way, it's time to dive back into Fazbear's Pizza and see who else could enter the fog. I'm going to be following the same guidelines I laid out in my first FNAF DVD video, and if you're wondering why some characters are missing in this video, that means they'll end the first video. But to quickly go over my guideline, animatronics that are possessed are mostly off the table, as going by Scott's own thought, they're victims and not murder robots. Plus, due to the fact that most of the possessed animatronics have kids' souls, they are off the table. With that said, I'm gonna kind of break that guideline, and I do think there's a way around that in order to get Golden Freddy into Dead by Daylight. As one of the souls that control Golden Freddy is the one you should not have killed, or TOYSNHK for short. But I'm just going to refer to him as Cassidy for talking's sake, as the other two are just a mouthful. Unlike most of the other victims, Cassidy seems to be very aware of what they're doing, but has become fully consumed by anger and a want for revenge. Similar to the Spirit and Sadako, which is how I also interpret Cassidy and why they are so powerful, as Open Cousin Night is William's prison of Cassidy's making, and now they're going to torment after for who knows how long. Plus, with Sadako, she's a specific type of spirit that's so driven by anger and revenge, they just refuse to die, basically. And if you look at them for too long, you just kill over and die. Which perfectly sums up classic Golden Freddy, and that's the Golden Freddy I think is mostly associated with Cassidy, as over Cousin whenever the one you should not have killed comes up, it is always classic Golden Freddy. So even by accident, I think Cassidy is that type of spirit, just manifesting as classic Golden Freddy. The way I think DBD could have Cassidy's Golden Freddy is simply by trading the age. And the fact that they're the one you should not have killed, I think they can make Cassidy's DBD backstory that they weren't one of the five missing kids, but they've forgotten sixth older victim who caught after red-handed by mistake and had to be silenced. Or something like they could even stretch it a bit, like they didn't say it's 5 kids, but the reality is 4 kids and 1 older teen, or just go with the first for simplicity's sake. Like with DBD Springtrap's backstory, things largely play out similarly to the games up to FNAF 3's End of Night minigames, that Ethan gets invited right after getting Springtrapped, and Golden Freddy didn't like that one bit. And in canon, since Golden Freddy, as I said, was able to create Ultimate Custom Night, I don't think it'll be that much of a stretch that he would also be able to somehow enter the realm by his own means. Kinda like Vecna from the D&D chapter. Now, with that out of the way, how would Golden Freddy work in Dead by Daylight? I can see him having a few possible powers. One thing is the ability to teleport. I see it working similarly to Springtrap's security doors, where instead of obviously being doors, it's posters of the different Fazbear cast. And whenever Golden Freddy goes to use that as a way to teleport, the poster switches from a Freddy poster to a Golden Freddy poster. Or freely teleport, like the nurse, which is self-explanatory. And maybe having a ranged attack too, as one of Golden Freddy's jump scares from the games is his disembodied head flying towards you. And you can see this being an attack, like Pinhead's ranged chain attack. With the last possible power involving Shadow Freddy, this shadow works similarly to Golden Freddy, being an Easter egg in FNAF 2 and guessing the game if you stare at him for too long. Then he appears later in FNAF 3's End of Night minigames, leading the other animatronics into the safe room POPGOES is hiding in. So I think making Shadow Freddy be a summon for Golden Freddy that works like one of the Night's guards could work, or be more like a passive presence like Nemesis's zombies. I could see any of these mixing together to form Golden Freddy's power set. Since they played it safe with Springtrap's power, then the second chapter could be an excuse to give a FNAF killer who has a more involved power set, for a lack of a better word. As for Golden Freddy's weapon, I think making it an aspiration of his head could be it, and the different heads would have the different jumpscare sounds attached to them. For example, his default one would be a DBD original jumpscare sound, but his classic weapon would have the classic Golden Freddy jumpscare sound attached to it. Next, perks and add-ons. Like my last video, I'm going to give an example of one perk for simplicity's sake, which would be in Golden Freddy's case, Hex, It's Me. Well, in a chase with survivors, the said survivor gets hallucinations, and they increase in intensity the longer the chase goes on. But this will be disabled for the rest of the match, the totem Hex is connected to is snuffed out. Finally, skins. I think this will be pretty straightforward, with Classic, Orbit Customized Fredbear, and the Escapist being the most likely options for Golden Freddy skins. On to the next possible killer now, the Mimic. Now, to be honest, even though the Mimic is a cool enemy, being able to switch into different costumes, but outside of the FNAF setting, I couldn't really see how this could work in Dead by Daylight. That is until I ran into a few killers I haven't faced before, who got my gears working on how the Mimic could work. Specifically, I mean the Hag, the Unknown, and the Twins. They all have one mechanic in common, the ability to switch to a different model. The Hag and the Unknown use it to teleport, while the Twins, they can separate, and you lose control of one in order to control the other. So, for the Mimic, I stress that he starts the match as the bare endoskeleton and has 4 costumes spread out across the map, each having a different power attached to it. So to start off with the 4 example costumes, Jackie is a crawler type, like what Alien can do, but to make up for her being so low to the ground, she makes a lot of noise, and she can use her stretchy arms to traverse the map and or to grab onto survivors to get a hit. But whenever you switch off Jackie, she resets back to her box to recharge. Next, Chica. She's the dedicated chase costume, as she's really fast, thanks to her rollerblades. When she's active, her cupcakes spawn for a short time, giving you a clear instant whenever a survivor passes the mouse in the chase. Onto a bit of an outdoor one next, as I do think Big Top could work. He's big and slow, so his role is to block off loops of vault points with his signs and extra appendages. So he's the only Mimic costume that's able to be active for a short time after the Mimic exits him. But survivors can turn him off faster if they're able to find a ticket and give it to him so he can unblock vault points and loops. The final Mimic costume is the Amalgamation. It is an all-rounder type costume, as it works with normal killer speed, but it has a boost to breaking pallets and disrupting walls. The Mimic can also just walk around as a bare endoskeleton. While not in a costume, the Mimic walks faster, but also has a larger terror radius. Now that we've gone over all the costumes the Mimic has, let's go over how they work when not in use by it. When a costume is not in use, they just stay where they were last used by the Mimic, and for a bit of map pressure, you gain killer instinct whenever a survivor is near a costume. The Mimic has 2 ways to enter a costume. The first and simple way is by simply walking up to a costume and using the action button to enter it, or the Mimic can teleport to a costume within a certain range. Onto add-ons and perks. I can see the Mimic having add-ons that let you start in the protector costume instead of being in the bare endoskeleton, outside of ones that buff each costume and how you and survivors interact with said costumes. For an example of a perk, let's call it Creator's Rage. It is the opposite of the Aliens perk that removes Bloodlust. Creator's Rage will make Bloodlust happen sooner in a chase, alongside the speed boost that comes from it be greater. But after hitting a survivor or Bloodlust stopping for a reason, you get exhausted and the perk goes into cooldown. As for the skins and the weapon for the Mimic, well, I think the Mimic could just be like a normal style killer where it's just the endoskeleton that gets the skins and weapon slots, with the upper costumes just being set in stone. But I also think it's possible for Mimic to get a special type of layout where, even though I suggested 4 costumes, on the other hand, I think it's also possible for Mimic to only get 2 costumes, and those 2 costumes being in the second and third skin slot, with the first skin slot regulated to just the Mimic, with the 2 other skin slots, as I said, going to the 2 different costumes. So for the first interpretation, where it's 4 set in stone costumes and just the Mimic, obviously the Mimic could be broken down into a typical killer skin layout where it's the head, body, and weapon. So one possible skin I can see for the Mimic is both Endo 1 and 2. And for the other interpretation, where the Mimic and the costumes are combined into skin slots 1, 2, and 3, the Mimic can keep its Endo skins, whilst the other 2 skin slots could be the other costumes we see in Secret of the Mimic, that both around the powers those 2 costumes could have. Let's move on to a part of FNAF content that doesn't get much spotlight. The fanverse. Since the FNAF fanbase has spawned some fantastic fan games, the fanverse was created around the Old Customized era to make some of those fan games official. Do I think we could possibly see some fanverse stuff and make it into DBD? Granted, they will most likely be just be charms and or skins at most, but there's enough the idea that we could see brand new characters of the fanverse into DBD, as that's far more fun. And what better way to start this off with one of the more active fanverse games, POPGOES. I can see it giving us one of 2 killers. And let's start off with the main man himself, POPGOES Weasel and the Black Rabbit. Yep, I think bringing POPGOES' constant threat of building the Black Rabbit could work in DBD in one of two ways. The first way being around the map are 3D printers passively building the Black Rabbit. POPGOES can make them print faster or leave them be and wait for them to finish printing that part of the Black Rabbit. Survivors can interact with those printers to slow down the printing process. Once a print is done, POPGOES has to bring that part to a table in the center part of the map to build the Black Rabbit. Next to said table is a 3D printer that slowly prints the head of the Black Rabbit. Once 5 components are placed on the table, the printer with the rabbit's head will finish printing and will be able to be placed on the table. Then the Black Rabbit spawns and control will be swapped from POPGOES to the rabbit. Or the second way being, the 3D printers are tied to generator completion. So if survivors rush the generators, the Black Rabbit is also built immediately. Or even these two mechanics are combined in some way. If the setup out of the way, how would POPGOES and the Black Rabbit work? POPGOES himself would be pretty basic, using his hands to swipe at survivors, but once a 3D printer is done printing a part of the Black Rabbit, he gains a temporary speed boost. Also, when he's carrying a part of the Black Rabbit, his eyes turn green, and nothing the survivors can do can make POPGOES drop a part of the Black Rabbit, nor can the survivors take a parts away from the table that the rabbit sits on. Onto the Black Rabbit. Now, she's basically a powered-up state for POPGOES mechanically, and I can see her playing akin to Spirit possibly. Going off if 3D printers' progress isn't tied to generators, if she's built and there's no generators unrepaired left, the rabbit will despawn after she's reached that time limit, and the 3D printers will immediately begin to reprint a new body for her, but at a much quicker speed. But if she's built after all gens are finished, she's permanently in play for the rest of the match. And if the Black Rabbit is in play and the last generator is finished, the rabbit gains a temporary power-up state, then reverts back to normal for the rest of the match. Now going off the second implementation of the 3D printers being tied to generator progress, the only major difference is that the Black Rabbit can only be spawned once and is permanently in play for the rest of the match, and they can't achieve the powered-up state. Though, one thing I can see both implementations of the rabbit having is the ability to use 3D printers as teleportation points to traverse the map. Onto an example of a perk for them. Scourge Hook Lux. Whenever a survivor is hooked on a Scourge Hook, which will power up a killer's power for a short time, as in shorter cooldown for their power. And for an example for a add-on, for the second implementation of the Black Rabbit being tied to generator progress, I could see them having an iridescent add-on that whenever the exit gates are opened, they gain their Lux powered state. Like the Mimic from earlier in the video, these two would have a unique layout for their skins, as for most killers, customization is broken down to head, body, and weapon. But for POPGOES and the Black Rabbit, I think it makes more sense for the customization to be broken down into POPGOES, the Rabbit, and the 3D printers. Honestly, I'm not sure what the third option should be, but POPGOES and the Rabbit having their own slots for their skins makes sense to me. For the skins, naturally, classic POPGOES and Rabbit come to mind, the Lux colors too, though since the Rabbit could achieve their powered up Lux state, I don't know if that would be an option for her. I can even see some POPGOES recolors from the arcade making it in, and the Rabbit having a Bonnie Glade skin, which could just be Toy Bonnie with the axe wound in his face. With those two done, let's switch our side to the secret antagonist of POPGOES, Simon. Doing the whole copy of POPGUY before the official FNAF timeline did, Simon is a scheduled copy of POPGUY, and yes, his name is Simon in the POPGOES timeline. And possibly, like Malhair, Simon's connection to POPGUY is pretty visual. Simon is an ever-evolving AI whose first flaws drives him mad, especially since Simon is chained to a wall for his whole life, as his creator thinks he's too dangerous to be set free. As I said in the beginning of this segment, Simon could just be a escape for Springtrap, but I do think he can be his own killer. Simon, at least in the original version of POPGOES, has a 7 saves mechanic in order to get his ending, and I think that could work as his power. The power would be a bit of a passive power, like Freddy Krueger's power, as around the survivor's icon is a Simon Says status bar, which fills up gradually over time, and after it reaches a certain point, Simon can make the survivors do whatever he wants. The Simon Says bar is broken up into 4 quarters. When survivors have 1 quarter filled and are in Simon's terror radius and are doing an action like ripping a generator, the Simon Says power activates. The survivor will be given a prompt on their screen, which may or may not include the phrase Simon Says. If you do what Simon told you to do, you will pass the skill check no issue. But if you do what the prompt says, which doesn't include the phrase, Simon gains killer instinct. If the survivor has 2 or 3 quarters full and in Simon's sight, he can force survivors to not use one action, like repair, heal, sneak, run, and vote. At a full circle, and in Simon's sight, he can invert the survivor's controls. In order to break free of the inverted controls, survivors will have to pass a skill check. Simon's weapon will just be his open palm. As for example, for a perk for Simon, gathering knowledge, the killer can block a generator and can see survivors' aura whenever they're near it. Finally, for Simon skins, he only really has 2 to 3 skins: Classic, Deadline, and his Evergreen Reboot design that's currently being kept secret until the release of POPGOES Evergreen. With Simon done, that's it for POPGOES for now. Let's move on to the next Fanverse series, Five Nights at Candy's. Like with POPGOES, I can see 2 possible killers coming from this game series, and let's start with my favourite one, the Rat. Being the final and secret boss of the first 2 Candy games, the Rat has been given some extra character to his mechanics, and one of them he has from the second game I think would be perfect for his DBD power, in my opinion. The Rat has the power digital corruption. The Rat stalks his victims, and when the shock meter is full, the survivor's POV is corrupted for a short time, and can get downed instantly if the Rat hits them before the shock meter runs out. The weapon for the Rat would just be his claws. An example for a perk for the Rat could have is Your Death, My Revenge, which will boost the effectiveness of all stat effects the killer puts on the survivors. Finally, for the Rat skins, I can see him having an unlevered Rat skin, the Five Nights at Candy's 2 even more levered skin, and I can even see him having a legendary skin of the cat, plus monster rat and cat skins, because why not? On to the second possible killer that could come from the Candy games, and it's time for the Puppet Master to reveal himself as we look at Vinny. Vinny took the Rat's final secret boss role in the third Five Nights at Candy's games. He's the puppet of the puppeteer, the closest the Candy's games have to a puppet guy, as he killed the original actors of the Rat and Cat in self-preservation, only for Mary, the main protagonist of the Five Nights at Candy's games, to reveal the puppeteer's crime. The Five Nights at Candy's fan wiki states that it's heavily implied that he died in prison and now just floats around in the visage of his puppet. I'm going to base Vinny mostly off his monster form, as it's meant to be the puppet and the puppeteer combined into one entity for that game. I pictured Vinny as an aggressive mobility killer, as he moves like he's on a puppet on strings, naturally. So I imagine his power being able to just pick himself up and move ahead or cut off a survivor very quickly. Something else I could see be a part of his moveset is his ability to fend off the flashlight. As in Five Nights at Candy's 3, you defend yourself from the monsters by flashing their eyes with your flashlight, but they can move to avoid being forced back by the light. Vinny having the hardest version of this mechanic, as he can quickly move and even move to the opposite of your room whilst in his attack phase. So in DBD, when a survivor to fast stun Vinny to go into a minigame, either similar to how you'd activate Skeleton's drones with bottom forms, or animation wise, Vinny does his attack phase animations, but for both the survivor and Vinny, it's just skill check bombs, and the best out of 3 wins. So if Vinny wins the best out of 3, he attacks and injures the survivor. And naturally, if this happens when the survivor is already injured, and if Vinny wins the best out of 3, Vinny jump scares the survivor to an insta carry, similar to Springtrap's axe when there's large in the survivor's back. But if the survivor wins, it's just a flash stun. The final possible ability Vinny could have is being able to hide under a generator, as just like with the other monsters, Vinny can also hide under your bed to break your music player. I'll go over that mechanic in a bit later, as long as a generator is being repaired or has progress, Vinny can hide underneath it. It will make a noise and rustle, like what happens when the Dreads enters a locker. If a survivor is on the generator, Vinny can jump scare them to an instant carry, alongside damaging the generator in the process. I can see one or all of these with tweaks being Vinny's base kit, or maybe becoming one of his perks. And Vinny's weapon would probably be his clawed hands. For an example of a perk, I'm going to wrap around back to the tape player in Five Nights at Candy's 3. Use it to help you get through the nights faster and have to juggle fending off the monsters and running the tape player in order for it to continue playing music. But if you're not careful, any of the monsters can break it and take it away, leading to a jump scare. So for the perk, I imagine it could dispel the incantations perks, as currently other than checking the basement to see if someone is doing one, there's no other way to counter it, from my experience anyway. For skins, Vinny is pretty straightforward, as he only has really 2 other designs, that being the normal Vinny and the first Candy's game Vinny being the only other designs for the character. Though maybe I can see some twisted version of the puppeteer becoming a skin, maybe. Onto the last set of possible fanverse killers now, with the Joy of Creation. Let's start this last category with the possible killer that inspired the fanverse being included in this video, Ignited Golden Freddy, who would play identically to the original Golden Freddy from the start of this video. As well, I was brainstorming ideas for this video. I did thought of that Ignited Golden Freddy could be a legendary skin for Golden Freddy. Let's maybe what about the other possibilities that the fanverse could offer in DBD. And since Ignited Golden Freddy, in my mind, wouldn't play any different from how I described Golden Freddy in the beginning of this video, I don't think there would be any point personally to go over all that again, other than I can see him having a unique perk, that being Hex the Fallen, where it lights up after a generator is finished repairing, and the Fallen begin to spawn around the map, growing more in number until all generators are finished or someone snuffs out the Hex. The Fallen would naturally give map pressure, and if the Hex is snuffed out, they will gradually despawn over time. Onto our last possible killer from the fanverse, and my overall personal favourite animatronic from the fanverse too, the Creation. This monstrosity is a combined form of the four main Ignited animatronics, in their last ditch effort to get the player. Would they need to be made smaller for entering the fog? Probably, as they're definitely taller than Springtrap, but just like with Nemesis from Resident Evil 3 Remake, there's a precedent for them to make killers smaller in order to enter the fog. So I can see why that this monstrosity can't join in the fun. As for the Creation's power, well, it just has to be called the Joy of Creation, right? Well, it didn't really display much of a power in the game, but I do think the Creation could work similarly to the Knight, specifically in how he controls his guards, as I think this could work as a power for the Creation. They have the ability to spawn in all of the Fallen: the Angel, the Blue, the Mouth, and the Red. The Angel is mechanically a weeping angel from Doctor Who. When it targets a survivor, only that survivor can see the angel, and it must keep the camera trained on it until it despawns, naturally, or if the Creation hits the survivor, which applies to all of the Fallen. Next, the Blue would be a mixture of chase and destruction, quickly being able to destroy gens, walls, and pallets, but only being okay in a chase. Onto the Mouth would be a trap lockdown character, where it'll be sleeping wherever you spawn them, like in the middle of a loop, for example. The mouth's radius in order to get a lock would be on the smaller side, but if the survivor is running, will wake up the mouth and chase the survivor. Lastly, for the Fallen, Red, the dedicated chaser. When Red walks onto a survivor, the screen will warn them to run, as Red is faster than them. The Creation's weapon would naturally be Ignited Foxy's hook. An example of a perk for the Creation is Skinwalker, as believe it or not, all of the Ignited and Fallen are double gangers. The idea behind this perk is after a survivor is hooked, this perk activates, and for a short time, survivors see fake survivors around them. If they heal a fake survivor, they get jump scared and injured, or maybe this triggers killer instinct. Now with all the killers done, let's flip over to the survivor side and go through possible survivors that could come from the fanverse. Going in reverse order of the killer category, the Joy of Creation has two possible survivors, Scott and his wife. If you don't know, the Joy of Creation takes place in a world similar to our own, but in this universe, Scott did stop making FNAF games after 4. Scott and his family have to survive attacks from doppelgangers who take on broken forms of Scott's creations. So basically, the Joy of Creation is that one time Scott had that bowling nightmare, but cranked to 11, as he and his family has to survive the doppelganger's assault of trying to take over their life. I'm going to assume that Scott would be the survivor, with his wife just being a skin for him. To be honest, I feel like this would be the most unlucky survivor, as well, literally would be just meant to be Scott himself. And, well, in a way, since he's still allowing the Joy of Creation to be unmodified, story-wise, in the fanverse, so I guess he's okay with it. I know, it can feel a bit awkward talking about a real person in this way. So granted, DBD does have Nick Cage, being Nicolas Cage, fully being Nick Cage, so I guess having Scott himself being in DBD isn't that much of a stretch, I think. An example of a perk with Scott being Creative Will. This is a token-based perk, where after getting 5 tokens from doing great skill checks, from doing actions like repairing generators or healing other survivors, you create and launch a blue glowing wall at a killer during a chase, which will push them back, using up all of your tokens. Yes, this is a modified version of his 4-4 attack from FNAF World, as in the Joy of Creation, Scott is literally just a normal person in that game. So I might as well prove something from his attack list he gave himself from FNAF World. As for skins for Scott, other than the one I already mentioned, I can see his avatar possibly being a skin form. Yeah, it'll stick out like a sore thumb because he's a glowing box man, but when it has not behaved before from adding glowing skins. With the Joy of Creation now done, let's move on to FNAC Candy's chapter's survivor, the main protagonist of the games, Mary Smith. Yes, I know that she has a daughter, Million, but unlike her mom, Million doesn't have any sort of character design as of yet, and at least as I know of. Plus, at most, I do think she'll just be legendary skin for her mom. As weird as that sounds, for example, for a perk for Mary, I see it being based on the Origami Cat. It is a guide and the last memory of Mary's mother. Since in Final Candy 3 and the remake of the first game, the Origami Cat helps you fight off Shadow Candy and helps Mary in the story of the third game to work through her trauma. So I can see this perk working like able to find the Origami Cat in a chase and to help you in some way, like being able to push back the killer so you're able to hide in a locker, or even just being generally helpful, like it'll guide you towards a generator. Finally, for Mary, possible skins. Other than the Destiny one we already went over, I think her base look could be her Candies, Burgers and Fries security uniform, with another one being her dress she wore in the third game, just size up for her. And for fun, why not her 1987 Sprite too? Lastly, for the Fanverse survivors, the POPGOES ones. I can see Fritz, Glade, and Strings possibly being the survivors. Fritz is the owner of the POPGOES restaurant, a man who practically built everything around the business himself, and a man the story of POPGOES revolves around, as it is his trauma from being the bite victim of the 1987 incident that's the catalyst for everything in the story. And at the end of POPGOES, he meets his end only still because of it. For an example of a perk from Fritz, well, I don't know if this will still continue to be canon in the reboot evergreen version of him, but in the original canon, Fritz installed an implant that connected him to the network of his restaurant runs on. How I think this could translate into a perk is, while on a generator, it becomes active, and while you're on it, you can see the aura of the killer, but only within range of that generator you're on. As for skins for Fritz, other than his younger self from when he worked as the fire-space security guard in FNAF 2, his only other notable look is his sprite alongside what becomes of his evergreen appearance. Lastly, Strings, the robot security guard made by Fritz with an experimental AI installed in it, giving Strings life as he suffers from panic, hallucinations from said panic, and even suffer a heart attack at the end from seeing Simon for the first time. No joke, that is the true end of POPGOES. Strings having a heart attack from seeing the scary purple skeleton for the first time. Now, I know Strings obviously has an abnormal design, but I do think with some size manipulation that they could still work as a survivor. An example of a perk from Strings is Boone Dreamcatcher. Strings in the story was originally a dreamcatcher to help Fritz with his nightmares about the puppet. So I imagine this perk working like this. After lighting a totem within that area of effect, the killer's power is given a longer than normal cooldown. Now, here's Strings' one major down point, just besides being a very unique design. They don't have much options for skins, as they have the original design and the reprint refresh of said design, but the differences on it are so minor, I don't think there would even be an option for a second skin, so they'll likely just choose one or the other, and leaving the one they don't use out entirely. With the only other design worth noting is the damaged Frayed form from the cancelled second game. Plus, Strings isn't even confirmed to be coming back in Evergreen, so there's no design there to talk about. With the only other possible design Strings could have is a DBD original design to make them fit the DBD Survivor skeleton. With all the characters done, what a map for them. In a weird way, I think they could reuse the Freddy's map, but give it a makeover to make it look like a different restaurant. Like, take POPGOES for example, they could just give the Freddy's map a makeover to make it look like a version of the POPGOES restaurant and change the animatronics to be the POPGOES animatronics. And I think the same about the FNAC Candies chapter, but then I also think that the factory where the animatronics were built and where the second game takes place could make sense for the FNAC Candies map. As for the Joy of Creation, there's already a map in the game that sort of works, as the Garden of Joy is already a map focused around a big house, just like the Joy of Creation. Finally, naturally Golden Freddy will just reuse the Freddy's map that's already in the game. With that, we're at the end of this video. What do you think? But in any event, thank you for watching.